Thank you for being media curious. If you like what's going on here, please comment, like, subscribe, and share. Now let me introduce you to my new friend, Raza Siddiqui.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey everybody, Kring here, and my new friend Raza Siddiqui is with us. Yay!
Karen, I'm so excited to join you on Curious Media. I love what you're doing, big fan, and great to be seated here. Not used to being on this side of the table, but let's see if I can't.
Let's see if you can figure it out. You look good in the suit, by the way.
Well, thank you. My wife tells me what to wear. I don't have much choice in that matter anymore. The beautiful Sarah Sadat, who always produces our show. I got to give her a shout out as well. Hopefully that's okay with you.
She's sitting with you. Yeah, that's just fine. But that's not what you look like when you're at work, are you? Do you wear a suit very often?
I tend to dress down when I'm carrying the big camera and the tripod with me. I'm one of those who believes that dress for the occasion, right? When I see politicians in a parade decked out in suits, I'm like, really, that's how you're going to relate to people? That's just my thing. I'm always like, customize for the situation.
For the situation.
That's it.
Hey, for those people who don't know, Raza Siddiqui is an Emmy-winning photojournalist and labor leader. Raza, and I've already told him I'm going to call him Raza at some point here, founded his company Skyline Media in 2001. He's worked regularly for numerous news outlets, including NBC Chicago WMAQ-TV. As a labor leader, he holds leadership positions with NABET-CWA.
Almost, it's NABET, but you're not the only one to have made that mistake.
See there, my
It's very
A's
common.
On NABET, CWA, the National Association of Broadcast Employees and Technicians. Besides all that, he's a radio and online show host. The radio show on WCPT, Life, Love, and the Grind, offers labor a voice and forum for discussion. His online show, Media Essential Workers, tells the stories of broadcast journalists and storytellers informing the public. So how about that? So,
I think you did a fairly good job of encapsulating all the boring details of my life. And it's a pleasure to welcome you to what I call my Media Essential Workers studio. My wife would love to call it what it once was, our dining room. That ship has sailed a long time ago. I believe Media Essentials, just like what you do in giving a voice to journalists, it's a very important component of what we need to do to address what it is that journalists do. It's a vitally important time to do that. So for right now, this dining room is the Media Essential Workers studio.
Sure.
Thank you for the whole overview.
That's not unusual for all of us journalists. Our dining room tables are becoming our workrooms as the pandemic is forcing us to stay home. So how has the pandemic been treating you? How has it influenced your work?
Well, I'll tell you this, it's created more of a need for what I do as a union labor leader. When the pandemic first hit in March, as everyone was told in Illinois to stay at home, to stay, isolated, what happened with a lot of our workers who work in the sports industries, as you could well imagine, their industry was decimated. All sports stopped. They had to quickly realize how they were going to feed their families, what they were going to do to put food on the table. And there was a rush on a lot of these unemployment sites. A lot of people needed to know how to get the resources they needed. And that's actually kind of the roots of Media Essential Workers. I stepped up not only to kind of guide them with, again, Sarah Sadat and Jeff Jacobson, who's a former IDES worker who kind of told people how to file for unemployment, what they're entitled to, if your work was reduced, how you can make that gap in payment, kind of resources to get journalists out there, sports technicians, the information they needed. Also, a lot of agencies, as I'm sure you're aware, stepped up, like the Chicago Headline Club, started a fund. Individuals like Larry Lage out of Ann Arbor, Michigan, started funds to help these people. So this was a conduit to help journalists find out what they needed to get what they needed. We're so used to telling stories to other people that we sometimes don't look out for the fact that, hey, we need information very pertinent to what we're doing too. So in answer to your question, how did the pandemic treat me? It kept me busy for certain.
Kept you busy, helping your colleagues. How did it affect your bottom line? You're, in essence, a freelancer, a contract labor. How did it hit you?
So I was one of the fortunate ones who still had work on a regular basis. I typically work for the 10 o'clock news, and my situation remained pretty much the same. A lot of people I work with at various stations, along with sports, were affected. So my mission became more of, I'm in a situation to help these colleagues, to help these friends. For the people that they are, for the people who I appreciate, but also for the benefit of our industry as a whole, right? Journalism is an industry that has been disinvested on for quite a bit of time. There's been less resources put in. And this was almost a situation that if we didn't save the good talent, the good resources, the good people who are out there telling stories, we could potentially lose them forever. So um, I guess long and short answer to what you're saying is it provided me an inspiration to make sure that I could help as many people as I could. So busier than ever. My full-time job, which luckily I was able to keep, as well as this job I took upon myself, which was trying to get the word out there.
Cool. Hey, let's go back a little bit.
Sure.
Journalism. When did you decide that was a good idea?
I'd say pretty much when I was born. I was like, I know there's a story here and I got to figure out what it is and how to tell it. My parents used to tell me that I would stand up in the crib and just look out the window. I would just look to see what the neighbors were doing. I think that was my early local community journalism. That was figuring out, okay, what's this person up to? What's that person up to? Wait, why are they doing that? So it was something I always wanted to do. But the most I can point to the direct feeling of when I thought that this was an important line of work was watching hurricane coverage and watching people, out there in these life and death situations, but telling stories that would help other people in the community, keep them safe. And I remember the first time I saw a hand come out from behind the lens and wipe what looked to me to be the TV to make sure I had a clean view of the picture that we were seeing. I was like, well, that reporter's getting a lot of credit, but I think whoever is taking that image, he's pretty cool. And that's when I knew, probably at the age of 12, that I wanted to be a photojournalist.
Wow. And how did you get your start?
That is a good question. So I knew I wanted to be a photojournalist. My dad always wanted to be a journalist. He was an immigrant to this country, had to give up on his dreams to be able to secure a financial future for his family. So he never pushed me to do anything else, but he kind of told me it might be more lucrative to get into business. Or my grandmother always said medicine. So I started off as a finance pre-med in college. Very soon realized that wasn't for me and did what I did best, which was pick up a camera and a scanner and kind of go chasing news. It's when I did that I realized, you know what, I'll learn something so that I can continue in case this doesn't work out. But I really want to pursue the journalism avenue. I did that. I worked at WICD in Champaign, Illinois. Grant Weedy, he was my first news director. And I remember he sat down, he looked at my resume, said, "You're a finance major. What are you doing here?" And I said, "Mr. Weedy, please." I said, "Just give me a chance. You're a news director. You're also an anchor man. What are you doing in both those roles, right? You got to prove yourself somewhere." Small markets, if you don't know, you do everything. So I told him, just please give me a chance, see what you think. He gave me a chance. I remember my second day on the job, they said, "Hey, we're short a photographer. You want to go out there and shoot something? We could pay you to do it." I didn't know how to, the photographers watching this will know what it means. White balance, which is basically set the color levels of the camera. Didn't know how to do that. Didn't know how to hold a shot long enough, but I wasn't going to tell him that. I was going to go out there, make my mistakes, and have him be like, it's better than no video at all. Through a series of mentors, Rich Flesh, who's now, I believe, news director at WCIA in Champaign, great mentor. Mike Irvin, who's in Peoria now, they guided me. They really, I never took a journalism class, never took a production class, but these people really guided me, told me what was important and how to carry myself in a way that that exuded that confidence that you need as a journalist to be able to tell a story. And these are people that I cannot thank enough.
Fantastic. Thanks for mentioning them. Hopefully they'll be able to see this episode. So how do you get your assignments now? So you have your media company, you work a lot with NBC, but are you always with NBC these days, or how, How do you get your assignments?
They're my main clients these days. Can I backtrack a little bit and
Sure.
walk you through the whole progression?
Yeah.
So I started when I came in Chicago as a news stringer. So I'd go out there, like I said, with a scanner, with a camera, go out there. So a lot of the news dispatching, a lot of finding the stories was basically hearing something on the scanner, hearing the candor in someone's voice, and going out there and seeing if it was something that that was a story that would benefit people to know. So that's initially how I started. Did that for numerous years. Shot something. It was a tragic story, as a matter of fact. It was a child who got shot on Halloween, um, somewhere on the southwest side of the city of Chicago. I got that, and then within, I remember maybe a couple of hours, I got a call from the Associated Press, and they were like, "Hey, you have some video that we want." Started reaching out to them and doing work with them. Through my work with them, as many people who are in journalism know, they distribute their video, photo all over the world. I ended up getting a lot of international clients, including Al Jazeera, Chinese television. At the time, it was called CCTV. It's now CGTN, I believe, Chinese Global Television Network. And then word went out that way. But in answer to your question, a lot of my work with them was usually either enterprise, or which is where I pitch an idea to them, or them telling me, "Hey, we're familiar with your work. We have this story that affects, that's something we want to pick up. Will you cover it for us?" And that's essentially how it started. Nowadays at NBC, it's the assignment desk. They'll come up with a news story and tell us, myself and a reporter, this is what needs coverage, and we'll go out there and we'll do our best to tell a fair and honest story.
Hey, Raza, you mentioned being a stringer, and I know that means freelancer, but being a stringer it's different than being a staffer, and there's a lot of hustle that goes with it. Can you talk, for people who don't understand what stringing is, can you just talk about that?
So stringing and freelancing in and of themselves can be very separate things too. A freelancer is someone who's waiting for a call to cover a story. A stringer, in its purest sense, it's funny. It actually comes from a newspaper jargon, verbiage about they used to have contributors who would contribute to writing stories, and they'd literally find out how much they pay these people by how much the text was with a string. Now, I'm a video news stringer, and what that means is I go out with, or I used to go out with a scanner and a camera and go chase and find news. So I'm basically my own assignment editor, news agency who goes out there and on spec. That's the biggest difference. You're not getting paid for your time. You're on spec going out there, like the movie The Public Eye, if you've ever seen it with Joe Pesci,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
and hustling to be able to capture some news and see if anyone finds it to be intrinsically newsworthy enough to put on their air. So that's the lifestyle of a stringer. I will take a moment to kind of plug Media Central Workers. If you're really interested in learning more about the stringer lifestyle, I interviewed Jack Susky, who's the second well-known stringer after Larry Schreiner in the city of Chicago. And he went on for about an hour telling the story about how life was being a stringer. And in that video, you'll also find, I wish Sarah was here, but she stepped away. You'll also find a view of my stringer mobile, which I still have. It's in my garage. Sarah will not let me she wants me to get rid of it, but I told her as part of my 20s, I'll never get rid of it. It's a Crown Victoria with 13 antennas, each of which tells the story of a different police or fire department or EMS channel in the Chicagoland area. And basically that was my lifeline to be able to tell the news of the streets overnights.
So you're always out and about. You're not in studio with the anchors. You are out with the reporters.
These days, nobody's really in there with the anchors. I mean, everything has been kind of decentralized to a point where we will bring our news vehicles home because, again, they want to limit the contact that we have with other people with the COVID-19. But essentially, even before the pandemic started, you're absolutely right. Our goal is to be out there in the field, in the community, telling the stories of the community. So unless something has gone terribly wrong, we are out there within the community telling and sharing their stories.
Are you always working with a reporter, or sometimes are you out and about getting your visuals and then come back and have a reporter work with you on the story?
It's a fair mix. I think most of the time it's the reporter refers to me and I refer to them as collaborative creative partners. We're out there deciding, okay, this story, what's the best way to tell it? What's the best way to be reflective of perhaps both sides of it? And so it's a collaborative effort. I'm out there with the reporters and we're kind of going over it together and trying to do so on a deadline.
So let's do some more name dropping. Who are some of the reporters that you've worked with at NBC?
If you turn on Channel 5 at a 10 o'clock news, potentially anyone that you see there is somebody I've worked extensively close with and have a lot of respect for. So, I mean, I would love to name drop there, but they get enough attention, right? I love the fact that the photographer is being showered with attention. So let's keep
That's
the
right.
energy on me.
The photographer is in front of the camera this time. You know, let's give him his due.
Exactly.
Right.
But I have a lot of respect, and I do want to give a couple of shout outs, not necessarily the people I work, but the reporters who have actually helped us, media essential workers. A lot of reporters have actually seen the value in what we're doing. So we have Jeremy Ross, who's a CBS reporter. We have Usher Qureshi, who works for, I believe, Scripps now, who come on and they collaborate with us quite frequently and they help us tell stories. So these are guys that I really want to give a shout out to for, they don't get paid for doing this. They come on because they believe in getting the word out. With Jeremy and Usher, we did a story about how to safely cover protest during a pandemic. Not a statement anyone would have thought they would be saying anytime last year, but it's an evolving, changing situation. So both of these guys came. We brought on a doctor as well. And Sarah, who else did we bring on? We brought a doctor and a security expert as well. And we were collaboratively able to answer questions, take questions that people had, and just kind of provide guidance to people. And now, a couple months later, other companies, big companies are saying we should probably do this, but we were amongst the first to do that. Robert Feeder actually at one point published some protocols I had come up with about how to safely cover COVID, how to safely cover news in COVID. So it was kind of cool to be the first person to realize that there was a need and that we need to have a general SOP protocol on how to do our job in this changing world, changing environment.
Mm-hmm. Hey, as a photojournalist, what do you think you owe your viewers?
The truth, nothing less than the truth. I owe them a reflection of what's going on in their world. I know you've interviewed Tracy Baim, who's kind of like a hero of mine. But I will tell you, one of the things that she said, she was on our show as well, was that, and I might be misquoting it a little, but it was essentially journalism is the first draft to history. So I don't want to goof that up. When I'm out there with a camera, I want to project a good view for my viewers currently, but also shed some posterity for future generations as to what the flavor was like at this time in this country, at this place. So I owe them the truth. I owe them a fair reflection of what's out there in the world.
Hey, you've covered some of the biggest stories in the region, the arrest and trial of Governor Rod Blagojevich and the arrest and trial of Drew Peterson. Those are great for the resume, but
they were great for the pocketbook too. I hate to say it, but that was the time when I was a freelance photojournalist. I was a news stringer, and some of the exclusives that I got, and again, it comes down to just being in the right place at the right time, but also having that journalism acumen where you can kind of approach them. The shot of Drew Peterson being arrested was based on contacts that myself and one of my guys had built. So I would love to say we're exclusive. Fox was out there too. But if you saw it anywhere except for Fox in the world, that would have been something that we did through our journalistic senses. I say that only enough to say that journalism matters.
Yeah. Hey, so like you said, good for the resume, good for the bank book, paycheck. Good for the bank. But have there been some times when you've been covering a story when you go, this is what it's all about? This is why I do this job?
That's a good one. I think anytime. Oh, you know what? I'm going to paint a picture for you. It's not going to be a beautiful picture, but it's going to be a real, truthful picture. I'm going to use some verbiage that might be a little offensive to viewers. Would that be okay? Can we keep it real?
Sure.
Can we have a real conversation? I was a news stringer at a time, right? And I remember I was very astute at being able to get people to talk. People who didn't want to go on camera, I'd at least tell them, convince them, share your story. So we would cover fires, shootings. whatever was the news of the day in the southwest suburbs, not suburbs, southwest part of the city. And I remember I would get these interviews, and another stringer one time came up to me and said, man, the only people you interview, and these were his words, are the crack whores. He says to me, he looks at me, fully, I can tell this is what he believes are the crack whores. And I'm thinking to myself, what a disservice. You're out there trying to tell a story, and you have these preconceived notions that these people are less than you, that these people have less of a right to have their stories told in their community, to have their view shared, that you have the indignity to call them a crack whore. And I remember thinking at that moment, this is why I do what I do, because these people deserve a voice. These people deserve to tell what their experiences are in life and not have that skewed and painted and colored by really what I consider a repugnant person who is out there to make a quick buck at their expense and not wanting to tell their story. And I realized maybe that this isn't what I want to do, but this is what I need to do. And this is what the community deserves in terms of a journalist on the beat covering their stories.
I understand, rumor has it, that you have been on episodes of Chicago Fire and Chicago PD playing a photojournalist. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, I'll tell you this. It's a funny story. I don't believe I've been on Chicago Fire. I was on a couple episodes of Chicago Police where I was playing an extra. You really do your research. I got to appreciate that. I've forgotten some of those things. The first time they had me setting up a news truck, right? So I'm basically putting the mast up and I appear in that role. The second time I show up, they tell me, hey, we don't really need you. Just stay in the truck. So this is just got to stay between you and me and whatever viewers end up watching this.
Right.
So I'm sitting in the truck and I'm like, oh, I'm really bored. And I see these extras that they got playing photojournalists, like the light is focused the wrong way and they're like rocking. And I'm like, I'm just going to go grab my tripod, set up my camera and go stand next to them. If I get on the show, great. If I don't, whatever. So I do that. About 3 shoots into it, some guy comes up to me. He's like, were you supposed to be out here? And I'm like, well, I guess, debatable. But at the same time, I realized they've shot so much with me here now that if I slowly back out of the shot, it's a jump cut. It's a glitch if they take another shot. I was invited to stay for the rest of that evening. It made a funny story in the newsroom after.
That is a funny story. And they're counting like there's 3. We only hired 2.
They requested me not to show up as the extra after that, though.
They were cautious, and you didn't work for them again.
I like to think outside of the box with that, but that was a unique partnership again, because I was working with NBC. So I was actually getting my union wages because they hired an NBC photographer to work for them. And I loved it. I loved the collaboration that they had with our guys, because again, you're never going to get more real than someone who does this for a living when you're trying to portray a photojournalist.
They were lucky they got the real thing.
That's
so they should have been grateful for that. So.
And I try to explain that to the guy that asked me why I was standing.
Hey, dude. Hey, so you had some pictures to share. One of the things, you're a man of service. You're a labor leader, and you have a feeling for charities and nonprofits. And you recently competed in a dance contest.
Well, this was about 4 years ago, so it wasn't very recent, but I just want to take a step back because I am allowed to do a lot of things because I have a beautiful wife, Raza Siddiqui, who's sitting here helping me on my end, who allows me not only to do things, but also encourages me to do things. I have a tendency to go out there full force. And then she's like, did you put thought into this? I'm like, I'm going to dance with the stars. She's like, do you know that that's a lot of work? Do you know that you also have a job and you're also trying to do this? And then I'm like, I'm going to do Dancing with the Stars. And she's like, okay, let's frame out how this is going to happen. And she'll help me achieve my dreams. And then she'll be there to document it. She calls herself the photographer of the photographer. I'm going to start with this. This is one of the reasons I love being a labor leader, is because I'm out there representing my friends, representing people I care about. And no better example of that than, Sarah, if you could pull up that one picture to show how people actually came out and supported me. These are guys I work with. You'll recognize a few of them from the Channel 5 newsroom. A lot of them have been on air. A couple of these are photojournalists who are behind the scenes. When I told them I was dancing for the stars for DuPage Senior Citizens Council, which is a Meals on Wheels program in DuPage County, helping to feed elderly who've worked their whole lives and now need assistance, they came out in full force. You see there just partially some of the people who are like, you know what, love that you're doing that. Here's this, here's that. And just not only the people in NABET, people in AFTRA who represents reporters, everyone just came out in full force and showed their support. That's why, sorry, if you could punch up that other picture too, that's one of them. This is more people who did the same. And it's just, it felt in, it felt very empowering to know that these people who I love and care about loved and cared about something that was important to me, and it's for people like that that I would do as much as I could.
Cool. Hey, what else? What else do you want to talk about? What haven't I asked you about?
Well, let me give a credit to a few other people who have done quite a bit during the pandemic to help not only journalists, but production people who were put out of work. Like I mentioned Larry Lage, who's out of Ann Arbor, who started a fund, a grant to help people who are out of work in the sports industry. There's Tim Toast Rucker and Scott Daly in Texas, who started the Stevie Nicks Foundation. Basically, if you're a photojournalist and you're injured on the job and you're freelance, there's not a lot you can do. But these people were looking out for their coworkers, their colleagues, and started a fund to help them if they got sick, if they got hurt, to make sure that they were able to feed their families, continue to maintain some standard of living. So, I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the other people who are out there being very proactive during the pandemic, who really do me proud and do our community of journalists proud, because they're out there looking for us. As journalists, we don't often tell our own stories, right? As a matter of fact, we're told it's not about you, it's not your story. But part of this story of this pandemic is the journalists whose stories aren't being told, because these are the people who are living it along with covering it. These are the people who wake up every day in the same world everyone else is and covers their story, but doesn't ever take that introspective look back at themselves. And that's fine, because I plan to, just like I know, Karen, you plan to be the voice of these people and let the world know what it is they do. I started Media Essential Workers to fill that need of helping people, but also to fight that whole, combat that whole effort of fake news. There's that whole fake news used to kind of mitigate what we go out there do. I don't go out there to tell a news story, expose myself to a potential pandemic, my family when I bring it back home, if I'm not believing in what I do, if I'm not out there wanting to do a service for the community. And it's not just me, it's every journalist who's out there, I like to think, who's out there doing it to tell a story, to talk about what's happening in the community. And it's time to give a voice to the people who are doing that as well.
One of the reasons I started Media Curious is because I'm a big believer that the fourth estate, the press and broadcast, are essential to keeping democracy strong. And we have the public sector, which is government. We have the private sector, which is corporations. We have the third sector, which is nonprofits. And then we have the fourth estate. And I think that the fourth estate, journalism and the press, need to be understood as well as government in order for it to be able to do its job well and to be able to inform the public. And I'm a little tired of people saying the media, oh, the media, oh, the media. Well, the media is made up of people, and let's dive into the gray. Let's navigate that gray area and start, making things a little more black and white, and start understanding who makes up the media. And so that's my soapbox.
And I love that you're doing that. Can I talk a little about one of the things that I feel like connected us?
Sure.
Karen, I believe you got my phone number from, correct me if I'm wrong.
Deb Siegel.
From Deb Siegel.
Mm-hmm.
Deb Siegel, if any of you are watching this, would know, is very adamant about making sure that people stay connected. She worked at Channel 2. She makes sure that people kind of stay in touch. And one of the things that Deb and I connected on is when this pandemic hit, I started reaching out to and calling the retirees of our union just to check up on them, just to make sure that they were okay, they were healthy, see if they needed anything. and we would just start talking, right? They would talk to me. They'd tell me about, hey, so is this still happening? Is this happening this way? And they would enrich me on stories that they had experienced. And our industry, it's kind of like I was saying before, there's disinvestment in it. So I was intrigued about hearing when there was a lot of investment, the kind of stuff that they did. And I really just started loving the stories of these people who created the news, made the sausages, so to speak,
Yeah.
that I grew up watching. And they tell me these stories like the Mirage Tavern and how the Sun Times started this whole, or basically built the facade of a tavern to catch, what was it? People taking bribes, right?
Right. City inspectors.
City inspectors taking bribes. And it was just hearing these stories. I felt like a kid at a campfire. And I would go into work and tell some of my friends that, like, that's a great story. I'd like to know more. And so I started kind of profiling some of the stuff they did. And it was just such a cool experience. I mean, again, it just paints a picture that you're never able to experience unless someone tells you about it. I talked to a guy who's a photographer when Disco Demolition went down, and just talking about how quickly it devolved into like a riot type situation. Just so many stories. We were talking to Jimmy Mack, who worked at NBC for multiple years, who was telling me about Flight 191, I believe it was, that crashed in Elk Grove Village, and what it was like in that newsroom that day at the Merchandise Mart where NBC used to be located when that happened, and just the thought process and the frame of mind of people, and just working through a tragedy, right? Like when you're working in a tragedy at that scale in your community, it takes an effect on you. I'm talking about more recently. I was talking to friends about how they're covering news. Buildings are boarded up, and it takes kind of an effect on you mentally. It's not PTSD, but it kind of is, right? People know these situations, and while everyone else is staying at home, you're out there experiencing a city you probably know, probably love, and seeing the changing landscape of it, and you still have to go out there and tell the story of what's happening. And it's just, I've experienced that now. It's fascinating to me to hear about people who have experienced some of the stuff I've only heard about. And that was just another byproduct of what Media Essential Workers helped us get out there. That wasn't even our main mission, but it has surpassed some of the other stuff we do in terms of interest from people who watch our programming.
Raza, what you were talking about was the idea that we as photojournalists have to be the observer. We have to be objective and catching what is happening in front of us, and we can't be participating. We don't have time to be upset or reacting. Our reaction has to be to cover the news. Has there been a time when you've been there to cover the news that you sort of broke that fourth wall and sort of broke the proscenium, so to speak, and got involved in the scene that you were to be covering?
So I'm a very strong believer that, as you said, you're an observer. It's not your job to get involved. And the biggest service that we can do is to project and profile what's happening and let, discussion take its course. I will say that if I were in a situation where it was life or death for someone, and I could be helpful to them, it hasn't happened. But if there is a situation like that, part of the
You'd put
story
down your
then
camera?
part of the story then becomes, there were people there to help. Did they help or did they not help? And I could see myself stepping into that role. But like I said, I firmly believe in pure journalism. So I'll take my advocacy and help my industry, journalism. I'll take my advocacy and help my people, the journalists who are out there covering the story. I'll be out there lobbying for journalists who are working in a situation like this to get paid to cover the risks that they take. One of the things I'm proudest of is the work I had done. Gosh, I'm getting old. It must have been 20 years ago, to fight for the cameras in the courtroom in Illinois. And I remember just the satisfaction I had, and I would lobby. And this is where I believe that the journalists shouldn't always be neutral, that they should be advocates on what helps them. Politicians aren't going to make the ruling to be more transparent, in my opinion. It's going to be the journalists who demand, protection for sources, federal shield laws, cameras in courtrooms, things that advance journalism, things that advance transparency. And I was very happy that the work I had done at a younger age, I think it was 2012, when I was in DuPage County, and the Illinois Supreme Court kind of initiated a pilot program where they let courtrooms roll this out. And I was amongst the first camera in DuPage County to tell a story. Tragic as it might be, that's a story that needs to be told. And the public sphere of the courtroom needs to be open to the public, needs to be something that's visible. And I bring that to say that in a way is how I break that fourth wall in terms of bringing a more transparent view to society of what society itself entails.
Gotcha. Cool. Is there any other stories you care to tell us about covering anybody, famous or not so famous, that you were privileged to cover?
You know, I think getting into all of that kind of, again, as we talked about, everyone has their biases. And I think if I ever give someone as opposed to someone else credit for something or fangirl over them, oh my God, I was so drooling when yada, yada.
Yeah, I was inviting you to be a fangirl.
But I think it does a disservice. I am very fortunate to be in the company of such great people like Raza Siddiqui, who's my biggest fan, Karen, someone like you who brings about light to journalists, who tells our story. So I'm going to say at this moment, the two of you are the people that I'm just gushing to be around.
Cool. Thank you. That's very sweet of you. And the other shout outs you have for anybody?
That's Sarah. If you hear a voice of God coming from behind the microphone, that's my Sarah, who's helping me produce on my end. Sarah, you have something to say?
I do. Karen, he's at the doghouse, but let me just, he's my fan. Just so you understand.
That's great. That's great that you guys are able to support each other.
I think that's the most important thing, because that's what, people forget, that journalists, when you're out there calling them fake news, when you're shouting them down, when you're screaming obscenities, when they're trying to go on air with a story, are people in your community. They have families too. You really want to make a point of debasing someone who's another human being who's out there doing the job the best they can, whatever preconceived notions you have of mainstream media or the biases you believe someone must have. Let's have an open discussion, right? Let's have that candid talk where you say, these are the problems I have. And you know what? Maybe some of those journalists might be able to have that conversation with their bosses where they say, hey, this is what I'm hearing in the community. So let's have some constructive conversation, some constructive discussions, come out of this a little stronger, a little better, not only as journalists, but as a society.
Sure. Thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thank you for coming on Media Curious. You're a busy guy, and I appreciate you taking the time. And Sarah, woo! Thanks for supporting Raza. And I think we're done.
Okay,
we're out.
Whoa. Well, I'm sorry. Just one real quick thing.
I just
forgot. Media Essential. You might see this handsome-looking button here. We started kind of giving it out for free to a lot of people, just to kind of build that solidarity. Doesn't matter if you're a cameraman, reporter. A lot of them went out. We still have some supplies. As long as these supplies last, if you want it, hit us up. We're on Media Essential Workers on Facebook. So we'll get it out. We're looking to support each other, tell the story, and I believe this, along with whatever else, is just a good way to show that, hey, we're all in this together. So, support Media Essential Workers, support what Karen's doing. Let's really just get the message out that the story of the Storytellers is a story worth telling too.
Oh, very good. Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time to be on Media Curious, and we are out.
Thanks again for being Media Curious. If you'd like to get in touch with me or with Raza Siddiqui, here's our contact information. It's also in the info box below. And now a special shout out to my collaborators. The talented, oh so talented, Jane Ricciardi does post-production work on each episode. CanTV cablecasts each episode periodically on Channel 27 in Chicago. And the Eventors and Chicago Public Square help talk up this series throughout the region. If you like what's going on here, please comment, like, subscribe, and share. And if you'd like to sponsor us, Let's talk soon.